Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a good night. I am Patrick. This is Storytelling Imperfectly, and welcome to the channel. And if you're new to the channel, I am Patrick, and I hope you like what you see. Today, guys, we are jumping in, diving in, deep diving. Hold your nose, get ready for some compression, because we are going deep into the Perron family haunting. Truth or hoax time. Stick around, it's going to get spooky. Now, the Perron family, guys, or the Perron family haunting, is probably better known to you guys as The Conjuring, which is, of course, a hit movie. James Wan's a genius. It is a horrifying film. I don't think any of us can watch that scene when the mom's in the stairwell in the basement playing hide and clap with the ghost. You know what I'm saying? When it reaches out behind her and claps his hands, everybody universally, I think, took a dump. Horrifying. And of course, the ghost up on the thing with the kids, oh, it's all scary stuff. But far different than what actually happened. So let's dive into this, guys. Like I said, we're going to do a deep dive into it, and we're going to try to get to the bottom of whether or not this is truth or hoax. Back in 1970, guys, a married couple named Carolyn and Roger Perron and their 5 children had kind of outgrew their current residence where they were living. And they were looking for a bigger home, something to fit their family, but also, more importantly, something to fit their budget. Because the fact of the matter is that Roger was the only breadwinner. It is 1970, and which was fairly commonplace at the time. The mom stayed at home with the kids and tended the house while the dad went off to win the money. The bread. Bring home the bacon. Whatever you want to call it, that was society at the time. And it didn't help that Roger and Carolyn, even though madly in love, only having that one income in the house, and Roger's income as a truck driver not being all that great to begin with, were struggling financially. So as they started looking for places to move out and get a better home for their family, they were confronted time and time again with things that really just didn't mesh well for them as a family. They were disappointed for the most part when the realtor that they had brought them houses. They were like, yeah, I don't like that, or I don't like the location, or it's too small. And in their price range, things were just really not looking that great. Until one day, their realtor came to them and said, hey, I got the greatest place ever. It's going to be perfect for you. Come check it out. And they did. They went and checked it out. And it was in a place called Harrisville, Rhode Island. And they drove there, they saw the house, and then they were like, okay, how much, what's the deal, that kind of thing. It was in their price range, and even more importantly, the house had 14 rooms total, 10 bedrooms, and 200 acres of land with it, as well as a barn and some outbuildings and all this. And when they found out the price, Roger Perron was just like, yeah, let's do it. And who wouldn't be like that? I mean, when you find something, guys, 200 acres is no joke. That's a lot of land. And a house that has 14 rooms is a nice size home. And when you have 5 girls and a growing family, at the price that they were given, which I am not sure of, but for 1970, it was top notch. It was a great deal. Now, there is some confusion. According to the parents, they had no idea about the history of this house, and they had no idea that this was potentially one of the most haunted houses in North America. However, whether they knew or they didn't know, it didn't seem to matter, because Roger was the type of guy that didn't believe in ghosts anyway, and so he was like, I'm sold. This is a great deal, and we're doing it. So they did. They purchased the house. Now, there's been a book written called House of Darkness, House of Light. And it was written by Andrea Perron, the eldest daughter. And that leads me to the fact that there were 5 girls, which was Andrea at the time, who was 12. And then you had Nancy and Christine, and then Cindy and April. Now, Nancy and Christine shared a room together. And Cindy and April shared a room together, and Andrea was the only child that had their own room. Now, again, I don't know why. Anything I've read never explained why this house had 14 rooms, 10 of them which were bedrooms, and Andrea was the only child that had her own room. I don't know. I don't know if the other rooms were used to store stuff. I don't know if they were closed off because the house was so large for heating purposes or economic purposes, electricity saving. I don't know. But I do know that out of the 5 girls, 4 of them shared rooms together. Anyway, Andrea, being the oldest at the time, she did go on to write the book about what happened to the family. And I'll put a link in the description. I mean, if we're going to talk about it, we might as well, if you're interested in learning more and truly detailed account of what the Perrons went through, by all means, go check out that book. I'm sure it's on Amazon or someplace like that. Anyway, when they first moved in, that very first day, they're moving their stuff in. Their realtor showed up and was like, "Oh, you're moving in? Great, da 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 da." Made small talk, congratulations, housewarming gift kind of thing. And then, before their realtor left, they turned to the Perron and turned to Roger and Carolyn and were like, "Hey, don't leave the lights on at night. It's probably best if you leave the lights on at night." And, Roger and Carolyn, what? And they were like, quote unquote, guys, "For the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night." Now, if a realtor says this to you, you should be concerned. But Carolyn and Roger just thought it strange, but I guess they weren't overly concerned. But more importantly, they just spent their life savings. So whether they were concerned or not about this cryptic message that the realtor had just told them, they weren't going anywhere because now they're broke and they have nowhere to go other than the house that they had just spent every dime they had on. I don't know about this one, guys. This is another one of those things. We're talking about truth or hoax here. What about you? What would you do? I mean, if you had a realtor working with you and you put the money down and you closed and you signed the papers at the bank and all of a sudden this realtor's like, "For the sake of your family, leave the lights on." I would be like, "What are you talking about, a Willis?" You know what I mean? I mean, this is one of those moments where I'm like, you need to explain yourself because now my children are in this house. And if there's something I need to be aware of that could cause them harm or threaten us in some way, you should have told me that crap before we signed the paperwork. But according to the state of Rhode Island, they do not have to tell you whether a house is supposedly haunted or that people had died in your home in the state of Rhode Island. Some states are different. Some states, they do have to tell you if there's been a death in the house, especially if it's a recent death, but they don't have to do that in Rhode Island. So if you're buying a home in Rhode Island, beware, because what you get is what you pay for, I guess. I don't know. Upon moving into the house, guys, as they were moved their stuff in, immediately they started having weird happenings, paranormal activity. But it started out super small scale, very innocuous. At first, things like the kids' toys, a doll or a shoe or stuff like that, a hair bow, would go missing or be moved. Carolyn Perron started reporting that her broom would be moved or go missing for a time. And she even said sometimes she'd walk into a room and there'll be she would hear sweeping. Or she would go into a room, there's nobody in there. Or she would go into a room and find a pile of dirt and dust that had actually been swept up, just not cleaned up. So she just assumed it was one of the girls. And who wouldn't? Maybe, kids are like that. They'll start doing something and get sidelined or sidetracked and go off and forget to finish what they were doing. And I could see that Mrs. Perron assume that. And the girls, on the other hand, were just assuming that one another were moving each other's stuff around. And again, I can totally buy that. It makes total sense. I mean, I grew up in a house that had 3 older brothers. If my stuff went missing or moved, they were the first people I went to. "Hey, what'd you do with my He-Man? What'd you do with my Transformers? Where's my Darth Vader? I need to know these things. I'm trying to get my play on." And they would be like, "Yeah, here it is. I stole it and you ain't getting it back." And then they would hold their hand out and I would swing a lot and nothing would happen. They'd beat me up. Not true. It's true. Anyway, I get why the girls were saying what they were saying because it totally makes sense. However, shortly, within a few months of being in the house, the paranormal activity escalated to the point where now things aren't just moving and disappearing, but now they started seeing apparitions. The girls reportedly started seeing a young boy walking around the house and playing with their toys or moving their stuff around. And they also started seeing a woman. In fact, Christine reported first that a woman came into her room in the middle of the night, She woke up and somebody walked into her room. Now remember, Christine's sharing the room with Nancy. Nancy didn't say she saw this, but Christine said this woman came into her room and bent down and kissed her on the cheek. So again, it wasn't an unpleasant. None of this interaction is unpleasant at this moment. And in fact, by reports and in the book, they even talk about when they were first there and they started having these paranormal activity moments and seeing apparitions and stuff. It was kind of lighthearted. It wasn't really anything to be concerned about. It was nothing menacing, nothing malevolent. And so they just kind of went with the flow. I mean, nobody really said anything. And in fact, they almost kind of enjoyed playing with these entities and having these interactions. As weird as that may sound. Roger, on the other hand, wasn't experiencing anything. As far as Roger was concerned, it's just an old house, and it's creaking and it's groaning, and it's your imagination. So when the girls are saying, we're seeing this, they're like, yeah, it's not, you're not seeing this. And even Carolyn, he was like, look, it's just a new house. We've been stressed out, but he was just really dismissive of it. Fast forward to about 6 months of living in the house now. Again, there's an escalation in the activity that is going on. Now things start taking on a little bit more sinister turn. Doors start slamming in the middle of the night. The girls started experiencing things pulling their hair, things of that nature. Even objects being thrown at them or across the room. Not necessarily nice things started to occur. And it was also at this time where Roger, even though, remember, he's a truck driver, so he would leave for a week or 2 weeks even at a time. When he would come home, he started reporting actually smelling like rotting flesh, like the smell of decay in his house. And he would walk around looking for it, but never could find a source. And then all of a sudden it would go away, the smell, as soon as it would come. And some might say it was a septic problem or this, that, and the other. I don't know. But I'm just saying, for my own personal edification, what had been reported. So what we could say is that Roger started experiencing things, for sure. Now, before we get any deeper into the experiences of the family, we do have to talk about the history of this house. Now, the house that they were living in, remember, it had 200 acres and a barn. I do believe there was a lake on the property and a creek. It was a lot of land, guys, 200 acres. But the house itself dated back to 1736. Now, that's when the house was originally built, the main part of the house. Now, it was added on to over the years, but the main part of the house, 1736. Today, guys, that is almost 300 years old. This house is still there, by the way. Okay, and it is being lived in currently by a husband and wife paranormal investigative team. They bought the house and they even rent it out. So if you're brave enough, by all means, go. You can stay at the Conjuring House, the real Conjuring House in Harrisville, Rhode Island. It might cost you about $100 a night. But if you do go, leave that in the comment section because I'd love to hear if you had any experiences. Anyway, the land goes back, for even further than 1700, but the property as a 200-acre farm goes back prior to 1736. But the house was built on it in 1736. And originally, I do believe it was Richardson, a man by the last name, or family by the last name of Richardson, that owned the property. But they didn't keep it. I don't know if it was financial problems or whatever, but they ended up selling it to a family with the last name of Arnolds. And the Arnold family, on the other hand, lived on this land and in that house for 8 generations. It's a long time, guys. Now, any house that's this old, anywhere in America, if you find a house that dates back to the 1700s, or a hotel, anything, go to Philadelphia, you find a building that dates back to the Constitutional Convention, all right, or whatever, Congress, the founding of this country, 1776 even. That's a lot of history there. And homes that old, usually you can pretty much guarantee somebody's died there at some point in time. Because the fact of the matter is that, 1800s, they didn't have nursing homes and stuff like that. I mean, very rarely did you send your elderly loved ones off to die. They usually just died in the back room of their own homes, in bed, surrounded by their loved ones. It was just kind of commonplace for the longest time. The further back you go to realize that people died in their home, and that was just kind of the case. But in the state of Rhode Island, like I said, they do not have to tell you if somebody died, even if multiple people died. They do not have to, by law, tell you anything about the property you're buying unless you ask, and then it's up to them whether they want to lie to you or not, apparently. But anyway, so the Perron house, overall, guys, the Perron house being super old, and the Arnold family having lived in there for 8 generations, turns out that not just people died there. It turns out that people died there in horrible ways. I mean, it has a dark past. It doesn't just have a past. It has a dark past. And that dark past consists of 4 people freezing to death, multiple people committing suicide, and we'll get to one of those is particularly important, and we're going to touch on that. At least 1 murder we know of for a fact, multiple children drowning accidents, lots of people dying, and then of course a plethora of people actually that did live to old age and succumb to old age. So there is a super dark history though with people being harmed, suicide, death by murder, rape even. I mean, some pretty nasty things occurred on this 200-acre farm in the past. And the parents were not aware of any of this according to them. All right? Now, what's important to understand is that one of the suicides that we were talking about in particular, all right, was like the Conjuring movie, a woman by the name of Bathsheba. Now, Bathsheba did, in fact, exist. And in fact, she was born in 1812 and lived until she was 70 years old on that farm. It is fact that she was accused of murdering one of her children with a knitting needle. So that part is absolutely true from the Conjuring film. Although they never could convict her of it, and she wasn't caught by the fireplace sacrificing the child to the devil and run out and hang herself by the tree in the front yard kind of thing, as in The Conjuring. She lived to be 70 years old, and then she went into the barn and she hung herself in the barn. I don't know why. Who knows what was going on with that kind of woman in that state of mind? I can't imagine. But that's the facts of the situation, according to Andrea Perron, and the history of this house, the Arnold estate, as it was called, and now where the Perrons are living. Now, they didn't know about this. They said, again, unaware. But why is this important? Well, one night, Carolyn Perron, like I said, things were escalating in the house. And one night, Carolyn Perron woke up, Roger's out of town, standing at the edge of her bed, at the foot of her bed, is an old skeletal-looking woman covered in like cobwebs with a crooked neck staring at her. And Carolyn was terrified. And who wouldn't be? Holy crap. I mean, it's just beyond me. But even more terrifying is it spoke to her. It actually said for that you need to get out. It said, get out of the house. You need to get out. And if you don't, your family will meet its end by doom and gloom. Quote unquote from the book. Doom and gloom. I don't know. I don't know. I do know one thing. If I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw a lady standing at the end of my bed, crooked neck, cobwebs, and skeletal looking, and said that I needed to get out or my family was going to meet its end and suffer doom and gloom, it's time to pack your stuff. All right, kids, in the car. Let's go. Now, again, they didn't have the luxury of doing this, okay? I'm joking around. The fact of the matter is that, again, the Perron family spent their entire life savings getting this farm, and they couldn't just leave. They couldn't just say, yeah, let's pack up and go. And even if they wanted to, they didn't have any money. They couldn't. So they were really trapped at this point in time in a very dangerous and scary situation, beyond scary. It was also around this time where the kids were playing hide and clap. Again, the iconic scene from the movie where the kids are playing hide and clap and the mom plays hide and clap and the scary clapping in the wardrobe and on the basement stairs. Terrifying. I hate that game, by the way. The Conjuring made me hate that game. I'll never play it. That terrifies me. But the kids did, in fact, play that game. And it was during one of these sessions of hide and clap that little Cindy decided to hide in a wood box, an old wood box. Now, what a wood box is, for those of you that don't know, it is a place to put your firewood in, next to generally your wood stove or in the kitchen. It has a lid. It's like a box that has a lid on a canter like that, and it kind of opens on a hinge like this, right? So you put your firewood inside of it, and the reason for that is firewood's really dirty. If you don't know, if you don't have a fireplace in your home or a wood stove in your home, Firewood itself, you get bark all over the floor, and you can bring in bugs. And if you stack your firewood outside to let it dry, which is absolutely what everybody in the world does, when you finally do bring the firewood in a load, so you don't have to go out every 5 seconds to get a log, you bring it in and put it in the wood box, and that way you minimize the amount of dirt and crap you're bringing into the house, or at least localize it in one place that is okay for it to be. They didn't use this firebox. So Cindy, during this moment of hide and clap, climbs inside the firebox. She's in there and she's waiting, and she's giggling, she's quiet, and she's waiting for somebody to find her. And she's been in there for a while, and she starts getting really hot and stuffy, and she feels like she can't breathe. And we all know how kids are too. Kids, sometimes you're playing, like I'm wrestling with my son or something, and he goes, "Dad, I can't breathe." And he can breathe just fine, but kids get that sensation sometimes when you're tickling or you're playing rough, and I can't breathe. My brothers used to sit on me, I can't breathe, I'm gonna die. And, I was perfectly fine, but kids feel that way. And Cindy started feeling that way, panicked and hot, and I got to get out of here. She went to go lift the lid up on the wood box, and she couldn't. It was like somebody was holding it down, like it was stuck. And she's pounding on it, trying to lift it up. She can't do it. She feels like she's suffocating. And then she starts crying and screaming for help. And she curls up in fetal position. She's bawling her eyeballs out. And all of a sudden the lid opens, and there's Nancy standing there like, what are you doing? You okay, Cindy? And helps her sister out. And Cindy was like, "You were holding the lid down." Nancy's like, "I was not holding the lid down." That's pretty terrifying in itself, and a pretty jerk thing for a ghost to do to a little girl. But then it even gets worse than that. So now you got Bathsheba making an appearance to the mother. The girls are now experiencing more aggressive behaviors on the parts of the spirits. Not only is their stuff disappearing now, but now they're actually being jerked out of bed in the middle of the night. Their hair's being pulled. All the girls are being pinched and slapped. Mrs. Perron says she's been laying in bed, sound asleep, felt like somebody slapped her across the face. She even reported at one point in time having a pain in her leg, and looked down, and it looked as if she'd been stabbed with a knitting needle. And just really, really horrendous and horrible things. The girls started saying that they started not just experiencing that kind of behavior, but also slamming doors at 5 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the night. Doors slamming, lights turning on and off all by themselves, as well as their stuff being missed. Now they're being physically accosted. And all of this is going on. Meanwhile, though, Roger, like I said, he's coming home, and he starts smelling decay in the house, but that was really kind of his extent of his experience until this moment in time, 6-7 months in. And now, not only was Roger, when he would come home, experiencing this rotten smell in the house, which is odd, but it could have been a septic problem. Roger started developing what you would call intimate relationship with Bathsheba. According to the Perron and Andrea Perron's book, Roger Perron started being pleasured by the spirit of Bathsheba. She had turned into a succubus, and for, again, those that don't know, a succubus is a type of demon that is female and sexual in its nature. And they feed off the individual as they are doing what they do, if you know what I mean. So Roger, on the other hand, here Carolyn Perron is experiencing abuse at the hands of this entity, while her husband is being massaged and pleasured sexually by this entity. And so Roger doesn't see the problem. He's like, "Hey, as long as the ethereal BJs keep coming, I'm here for the ride, baby. We ain't going nowhere." And, and all jokes aside, what's really happening is, if this is really what happened, then obviously this demonic entity is twisting Roger's mind as it feeds off him and twists him to believe that the girls are his enemies and his wife, I'm going to take you out of this house and this, that, and the other. And Roger wasn't having it. He's like, "No, we are staying here. Beyond me, but this is his decision." And again, I think that it could have been fueled by a dark entity corrupting his mind and making him think weird things. But on the other hand, again, let's remember that they were broke. Financially, they were completely belly up, and they had nowhere to go and no money to go and do anything with. It was also, though, at this time where the girls started experiencing another entity that they said made Bathsheba look like Winnie the Pooh. It was truly terrifying. They would wake up and they would see a grinning man standing in the corners of their room, with this crooked smile. and black, this black shadow man. But they could see his face, and he was twisted and smiling at them. That's terrifying, guys. I mean, if I woke up and found some dude standing in my corner, let's just go and say, it's game over. Somebody gonna die. You know what I mean? At this point in time, I'm gonna freak out. Now, I'm a grown man. But if I was a child and saw this, it's game over. I'm just gonna roll over and die. I mean, I don't know what else to do. There's some dude in my room. Worse than that, though, is that the reports of the girls, and they won't go into great detail of this. None of the girls will. And to this day, all of the girls still maintain every bit of this is true, even though Andrea was the one that wrote the book, House of Darkness, House of Light. The other girls still attest that her sister is telling the truth in the book and that these experiences absolutely happened. Worst of all, though, and what they won't talk about, is this particular entity. He was the worst by far. And he even started sexually abusing the children, started molesting the children. I can't imagine. And again, how powerless you must feel as a parent. So your children come and tell you this, and the mother's like, this is, what are we going to do? And Roger's like, this is all nonsense, and, I don't really believe it, and I'm going to go over here and talk to my ghost girlfriend. And it was just a really trying time for the family. And again, most paranormal experts and stuff will tell you that entities, especially dark entities, feed off negative energy. And all of that is certainly being created in this house. I mean, these people are totally living in a nightmare. They're high stress levels, high anxiety. They don't want to go to bed at night. Everybody's terrified. I just can't imagine. And they're trapped because they can't leave even if they wanted to. But it was at this time, Roger went out on a extended trip for his company, driving, like I said, truck driving, and delivering a load of something. And this is when one of Carolyn Perron's friends, who had seen Ed and Lorraine Warren on the television, because at this point in time, Ed and Lorraine Warren were pretty much at the height of their fame during this period of time. They were well known for the Amityville haunting, the Enville haunting, the werewolf stuff. I mean, all this stuff that they were in the news a lot. And so Carolyn Perron's friend said, you should reach out to the Warrens, see if they can help you. And she did. She actually went to the Warrens and talked to them. There was a lot of discussion. They said, we will come to your house and see what we can't do. And Carolyn went back home. This is from all reports when Roger came home and Carolyn and Roger were sitting there, and all of a sudden 3 cars pull into their driveway, and the Warrens get out, and they had a freaking entourage with them. Roger Perron was super unhappy. At this point in time, nobody had told Roger about the Warrens or that they were coming, and then when they just showed up unannounced like they did, he was pretty upset about it. And in fact, rumor even is, according to reports and the children, is that Roger Perron and Ed Warren didn't get along very well at all. I'll just say this. It wasn't Owen Wilson helping the old boy fix his car out in the garage and the family stuff that you see in The Conjuring. It was quite the opposite. Now, something to be said about the Warrens, all right, especially Ed Warren, is that there are also lots of allegations against him today about him being a bully, about him intimidating people that he worked with, clients that he worked with that were having paranormal experiences. I don't know. I'm just stating what's out there, guys. This is just information that I have read personally. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I wasn't there. But this is the reports. And Andrea Perron, in her book, most certainly makes it very clear that Roger Perron didn't want Ed and Lorraine Warren there, and that he was quite upset. But he also did know that his family needed help in some way. And so, and not only did he indulge his wife and his kids by letting the Warrens come in with all these people, gets his better judgment, he did know that they, or I guess secretly he hoped that they would be able to help. Because remember, these people are living in a nightmare at this point in time. So, the Warrens came in, and the first thing that Lorraine says when she walks into the house is kind of looking around and meeting everybody, is that she felt and saw a dark entity and that it was Bathsheba. She said this out loud, like to everybody. There's a dark entity here and I'm sensing it's Bathsheba. Now, Lorraine was a self-proclaimed clairvoyant or medium that she could talk and sense spirits or see spirits. Whether this is true or not, again, your guess is as good as mine. That's why we're doing this truth or hoax thing. But this is what she said. And so that's how the parents started saying, well, Bathsheba's pleasuring Roger, and she's stabbing me with knitting needles, says Carolyn, and slapping me and biting me, and she's hurting the kids, and this, that, and the other. According to the Warrens, as they investigated this house, Lorraine said all told she sensed around 9 spirits in this house, all of them dark entities. As they stayed with them and investigated the house and whatnot, eventually it kind of culminated. Pounding on the walls at night, finding blood and orange blood, weird stuff going on, guys. I mean, like super weird stuff going on. Again, the hair pulling, the slapping, objects being thrown, and the Warrens documented this as well, according to their reports and from what Andrea Perron said. But eventually, what it culminated as is that, while they're hearing "get out" and being attacked by spirits and everything else, Ed and Lorraine Warren, being devout Catholics, and they are devout Catholics, handle all paranormal things they ever handled with a religious perspective. And according to Lorraine, telling Carolyn Perron that they needed to go to church, they need to get some religion, because that's what's going to help them. All right, that anything else, and we're not going to be using sage and smudging the house and this, that, and the other. You need to go to church. You need to get your family into church. You need to find Jesus, all right, and then you need to bring him back here to your house, because nothing else is going to help you with all these demons running around. And there were 9 of them in the house. So the Catholic Church never came in. They never did anything for the Perron family. And ultimately, what we see in the movie was complete hogwash. Now, what did occur was, at the culmination of the Warrens' time in the house, Ed suggested that they all have a seance down in the basement. All right, try to confront this demon. Or demons, plural. Now, the girls were not allowed to come downstairs, and they were told to stay upstairs, but Nancy and Christine snuck downstairs and watched the whole thing, according to Andrea in her book. So Andrea wrote about it from the perspective of Nancy and Christine. And what they saw was absolutely the worst, guys. I mean, I can't imagine seeing this as a kid. If this happened, it would have been horrifying to behold, because they watched hours of their mother being possessed by this demon, writhing on the floor, contorting and twisting in super unnatural ways, screaming and talking in voices and languages that her mother didn't know. And all the while, Ed and Lorraine, completely out of control, had no clue how to help, and just kind of went with this. And for hours this went on, until at last they did get the demon to leave Mrs. Perron's body. And, that was it. Roger Perron, as far as he was concerned, was done. Okay, again, it's not like the Conjuring movie. I love the Conjuring film. James Wan had to give us the old happy ending. But the fact of the matter is that night, what really happened after that botched seance and the possession of Carolyn Perron, Roger Perron totally booted Ed and Lorraine Warren out of his house with their entourage. He kicked them out. They never returned. And it was even stated in the book that Ed Warren and Roger Perron almost came to blows. Like, they almost started duking it out. Which doesn't surprise me, because it sounds like Roger Perron was kind of a man's man. And Ed being Ed, he's a Navy veteran, also combat veteran of World War II. Ed wasn't really the scared type, and he was kind of a big guy. So I could see that totally happening. But nonetheless, it didn't come to blows, but they left. Ed and Lorraine Warren and their family, left that house, and they did not perform an exorcism. Ed did not exorcise the demons. And they ultimately didn't help the parents at all. Guys, this went on, sadly, for the Perron family for another 9 years. They lived in that house until the early 80s and never stopped experiencing just terrifying phenomena. I can't imagine what it would have been like to live there that long and to go through the things they went through. So there's what happened. That's according to the book, House of Darkness, House of Light. One by one, the girls got old enough. As they got old enough to move out of the house, they most certainly did. I mean, as soon as they were old enough to leave the house, they left. They went to college. They got an apartment. They went to work. But they left home. And then, and like I said, in the 80s, finally, Roger Perron and Carolyn Perron sold their house in Rhode Island, and they moved all the way to Georgia. I mean, that's about as far away. I mean, aside from Florida, That's as far away as you can get from Rhode Island. And that's exactly the way they wanted it. And remember, that house now sits there. It's still there to this day. It's owned. You can go stay there. And if you do, let me know, because I want to know how it went. But now let's get to the truth or hoax part. Okay, we've heard the story, the accounts according to everybody else. So let me go ahead and throw in my 2 cents about whether or not I think this is true or not. Or things that at least point in the direction of one or the other. One, I don't necessarily understand why anybody would lie about something like this, but people do all kinds of things for all kinds of reasons. They didn't make any money off this. Roger Perron and Carolyn Perron never made a dime off of this. And again, it wasn't until they finally sold a book in the 80s that Andrea made anything off of it. And then now in the 2000s, to where the rights were bought by a movie studio. And of course, they eventually made some money off of it. But you're talking about, decades of not making any money off this. Not any real money. So I don't think there's the I did this for fame thing. But people lie for a lot less. I don't know. I'm just saying personally don't see why the Perron family would make something up like this. One thing I did forget to mention about the house itself. The reason that they couldn't leave, and I said, they were there for so long, they kept getting setback after setback. So when you ask yourself the question, over 10 years, Patrick, they couldn't come up with enough money to leave this house? No. Because one thing after another would occur. Anytime these guys, the Perron family, got enough money saved up to move on, something in the house would break and need repairing. Like once the pipes in the house burst during winter. I mean, guys, that's thousands and thousands of dollars to fix. So even back in the 70s and 80s. So they have legitimate reasons why they never moved out prior to the 1980s. But on the other hand, guys, I'd have sold the house as is and just taken a loss. I mean, if I'm getting molested and my children are in danger, I can't see anything keeping me in a house. I would live on the streets. I mean, I would live in my vehicle. I would go to a hotel. I would have leaned on a family member. I would have been like, hey, my family's coming to your house. My house is haunted as hell. Don't believe me? You go stay there for the night. And we'll stay in your house. And you can come back in the morning and tell me what you think about being spiritually sodomized. Because that's what was going on. I'm just saying. This is my point of view as to why I think it's true. All right? I just don't see why they would lie about it. And why a family would stay in a place, that they didn't have to. But that, on the other side of it, why it's a hoax, is that if your children are in danger, as a father, I can say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to save them to make sure they're not being harmed. Spiritually or physically or any other way. So, truth? Hoax? I don't know. Ed and Lorraine Warren. Guys, there's a lot to be said about these guys. And today, whether you believe them or you don't believe them, whether you think they're legitimate or you think they're illegitimate, as paranormal investigators or demonologists, people have a lot to say about them one way or the other. I really like the Warrens. I really like to believe in what they do, and I really like to believe that they're telling the truth. For numerous reasons. But one, I just genuinely think that they were good people trying to help people. But I have been wrong so many times in my life, it's not even funny. And being willing to admit that these people might have just been charlatans is a part of the truth or hoax segments. So let's delve into why they might be full of it. One, guys, when Lorraine walks in and starts talking about how I can sense an evil spirit, 9 evil spirits, and then talk about Bathsheba. Ed and Lorraine Warren could have very easily, guys, researched the history of this house. They were masters at researching things. They were quite educated individuals, and they were quite capable of doing investigatory research. In fact, Ed at one point in time was a police officer. He knew the ins and outs. He knew about fact checking and running people's names and running the history of people's properties. This is something he was capable of doing. And so, yes, it is absolutely, absolutely plausible that Ed and Lorraine Warren researched the history of the house, found out that a lady named Bathsheba was there, the dark history of the place with the suicides and the murders, and then came in and be like, oh, I sense Bathsheba. And everybody's like, oh, how did she know that? I don't know. It's amazing. It's possible. And as well as the fact is that, again, The Warrens talk about how much they've investigated and how much evidence they've accrued over the time period that they were alive and investigating paranormal phenomenon. They think they said somewhere around that they were on 10,000 cases over their history, over their time as paranormal investigators. They investigated over 10,000 cases. Guys, they even have their son-in-law, who's married to their daughter, Ed and Lorraine's daughter, who runs their business now, who runs the Occult Museum. You know, he's got his own YouTube channel, and I'll put a link for it in the description below. But here's the thing. Out of all these cases and all this evidence that they haven't released dick, guys. I'm sorry, but they haven't. You know, they supposedly have all this evidence of paranormal stuff. If you really want to show the world that this stuff truly exists, why would you sit on it? Oh, well, the demons can reach through the screen, and we got to keep this stuff locked up because it's like keeping the demons locked up. I don't buy it. Sorry, but I do not buy that. And as much as I like the Warrens, and as much as I want to believe in what they did, a big portion of me believe that they were, in fact, out for a buck. And they were a bit of charlatans. And they weren't legitimate when it came to a lot of the experiences that they talked about having. And they fooled a lot of people. Unfortunately, I do believe... like I said, I can't prove it all the way, guys. There's no way to, right? But common sense for me dictates that a lot of what they said were just untrue. And why they did it, I don't know. I don't think they did it to be harmful, and I don't think they did it because they didn't want to help people, and I don't necessarily even believe they did it because they didn't believe what they saw. Sometimes people can even fool themselves into believing things that are untrue. But I don't necessarily buy into this particular haunting case. I mean, it is one of the most well-known that the Warrens did, but I don't know. I mean, the other side of it is, too, is that with the Perron family, again, if you're children of this and you're children of that and you got to save money, I get that. But if you are truly being molested by ghosts and stuff, I just don't understand why anybody would stay 10 years in a place like that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, guys, I mean, I think there's a lot more to this case, obviously. But as far as deep dives go, we've dove as deep as I'm willing to dive on a video. And this is already a long one. But I'd love to hear what you think. Truth or hoax? Do you believe in the Perron family haunting? Do you believe in the Warrens? Do you think that they were just charlatans and out for a buck? Somebody left a very interesting, when I did the deep dive into the Amityville haunting, which was just more about the house and less about the Warrens, I did bring up the Warrens in that video. And out of everything I said in that video, I talked about the Warrens like this much compared to the whole video. But one person obviously zoomed in on me kind of poking at the Warrens. And they weren't upset, but they did say, well, regardless of whether the Warrens were hoaxers or telling the truth, it really comes down to the fact that they are amazing storytellers, either way. And that is a fact. And I can absolutely appreciate the heck out of that. Regardless of whether Ed and Lorraine Warren were out to make a quick buck or charlatans or delusional themselves, the fact of the matter is those people could tell a hell of a story. And I can absolutely appreciate the Warrens for that. But what do you think? I would love to hear it. Leave me something in the comment section below. But that's it for me today, guys. And if you enjoyed this video, please smash in that like button. Turn it blue. It helps me out. Lets me know you're enjoying the content, which is super important. And also, if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, or there's some cases you'd like for me to cover, leave that in the comment section below, and I'll see if I can't make it happen. Also, guys, feel free, follow me on my other social media sites that are in the description below. And by all means, if you are new to the channel and haven't already done so, you've been here this long, subscribe, push that red button and haunt it. Do whatever you got to sick Bathsheba on it. Just make sure it gets clicked. And turn that bell upside down by making it ring, ding, ding-a-ling-ding. Because if you don't, you will miss out on the next video right here on Storytelling Imperfectly with your host, Patrick, the most imperfect host on YouTube. But that's it. I'm out of here, and I will see you guys in the next video.